Welcome to the Dr. Chris podcast, a space where I delve into all things movement, fitness, and wellness related. Today's guest is Grayson Strange, who posts unique content on Instagram. Grayson is the founder of Basis Health and Performance, who promotes a fitness approach centered around functional range conditioning. He has a unique perspective on training that arises as a result of his experiences in CrossFit, strongman competition, cheerleading, mobility, and performance training. We talk about his personal fitness journey and his interest in sustainable training and long-term health. If you are interested in mobility training and movement skills, and you want to learn how you can maximize these fitness markers for yourself, then this is a conversation for you. For more insightful interviews from a wide range of athletes and professionals, subscribe to the Dr. Chris podcast on YouTube. For long-form content related to human anatomy, injuries, and injury prevention, check out the Dr. Chris channel instead. And finally, if you're looking for exercise tips and workouts related to mobility and strength training, subscribe to my online gym, Human 2.0 Fitness, on YouTube. And now, let's get to our guest. Grayson, thank you very much for agreeing to be here with me to discuss all things mobility and training and whatnot today. So first question I have for you, young man, and I can call you that because I am a little bit older than you. Who is Grayson Strange, and what is it that you do?
All right. Well, Grayson Strange is, I would say, a former meathead who still wants to be a meathead, but I train people. Wife and I own a business, and we train people. We specialize in functional range conditioning, but we love all strength-related sports. And that's definitely what led us down this path, was long time doing weightlifting stuff and just being a meathead. And outside of that, I love mechanical things, which I think is what got me in bodies, like cars and training. I mean, anything that's mechanical, I really like. So that's a big component of my being. And then, like hip hop, skateboarding, my other hobbies that I love so much. But the training world is probably the biggest part that consumes my brain.
Okay, cool. Now, I told you before we got started, I would go off on tangents, and I'm going to go off on the first one here. Just out of curiosity. Yeah. So you said hip hop, skateboarding. So hip hop, who are your people for hip hop?
Oh man, well, I like quite a broad spectrum there, but I think the thing that's deepest in my soul is like late 80s and through the 90s of East Coast hip hop, like the classic stuff. I mean, the classic big names, but like one of my all-time favorites is still Black Moon. I can never get enough Black Moon. I don't know what it is about their sound and like just that gritty, grimy New York era. Just really, I love it. So that's probably my most favorite. Having lived in California for 7 years prior to being in New York, though, I definitely went down the West Coast rabbit hole. So I love pretty much all hip hop. Outside of like, there's a lot of new stuff that I don't jive with. I don't know if I'm just getting to that point like where I heard my parents were like, back in my day, the music was better, because I feel like I'm starting to get like that now. But yeah, that's pretty much. I mean, there's a few people who are current who I really like, but not like the old school stuff. What about you?
Cool. So I'm kind of in the same boat as yourself with respect to old school versus new school. And so some of my big time favorites, KRS-One, Rakim, like these are some of the original greats. And there are lots of people who are very talented, but those two in particular for me are huge just because of their lyrical skill. And to me, Rakim is one of the greatest rappers of all time. And there are people currently that I think are quite skilled and that I think are true to the rap, the original hip hop sort of rap genre. Like I kind of like J. Cole. I like what's his face now? Oh, the name just escaped me there. If I remember it, I'll come back to it. But there are a few young cats today that I like, but as you said, I now know that I'm old because I do sound like my parents. Because my kids, my sons play for me some of the stuff that they listen to now, and I'm like, what is that trash? Like, what are they saying? They're mumbling. You can't hear anything that they're talking about. And so yeah, the old school is it for me. But you know, I do love music of all types, and there are lots of sounds throughout the years in hip hop and rap that have that I still find favorable, but the old school is mostly it for me. So
I'm with you, man. I have to say, KRS-One's album Return of the Boom Bap, like that's an album that probably gets played at least once a week in the household still after all these years. It still gets in the regular rotation because it's just so damn good.
Nice. I like it. So I know we're really going to get off well, because with that
No
as
doubt.
a foundation, then everything else is great. So
That's right.
Second question, my man. So what is Basis Health and Performance, and what is your mission there?
That's a great question. So, I mean, the Basis Health and Performance is sort of it's our overall training business, but the foundation of it is really sort of built around the concepts of functional range conditioning. I don't know how familiar you are with all that stuff. It's started in Canada. All those folks up there who created this stuff are all Canadians.
Yep.
But over the years, like we've had various gym businesses, and it was always sort of the same issue where you get people in, they have mechanical issues, injuries, stuff like that. And so much of our training was sort of finding clever ways of avoiding those problems. And so it's like we kind of make up these lists of like, we know these things work for you, these things don't. We'll just do these things that work for you and stay away from those forever. And when we got into functional range conditioning, it turned out to be a really easy way where we could actually resolve these issues that people had been having. And for the first time in our life, like my wife and I, we've been training people since about 2010. And we've been doing FRC based stuff for about 6 years now. So up to that point, it was sort of that same model of like, avoid the stuff that causes problems, do the things that don't, and we'll just hammer on those. And then the last business that we had, which was called Basis Health and Performance, but we had an actual gym in California. We had like a 10,000 square foot facility. And so we had a lot of old clients who had issues, and we started to have them really go away, like truly have somebody who could just go back and do pull-ups again as much as they wanted and have their shoulders feel good. We realized like, wow, this is a really powerful tool. And it created this idea where we just wanted to build a gym around that, like not for the sake of pursuing particular exercises or sports, more so built around what's a healthy human shoulder supposed to do? What does your shoulder do? Okay, now we have this goal for a shoulder, and we know where your shoulder is. And so we can train those qualities to get your shoulder there. And so it was really built around that, like helping people develop bodies that would allow them to do whatever stuff they wanted to do. That's a big thing that we're really passionate about, as opposed to like, this is good, this is bad. It's like, we can make things good, but we need to get a baseline of where your body is, and then help you become a more functional human, not from this perspective of squatting or deadlifting or doing any of that other stuff. Just what is a healthy body supposed to do? So functional range conditioning, heart rate monitored conditioning to develop aerobic capacity. And those are sort of the two like fundamental things that are really the biggest components of our business now.
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with that, with FRC and FR. We've hosted Andrew Spina a few times at our facility. So anytime he comes to Ottawa, then he basically comes to our place, largely because of the size. We are not as big as what your California facility was, but we are 6,500 square feet. So he likes it because he can pack 75 people in there to take a course.
Yeah.
So I'm familiar with that and with the concepts of that. One of the things that you mentioned a little bit about, and it talks about this online on your website, is that you train a number of different fitness modalities, including classic strength training, strongman conditioning, kin stretch. So a whole varied list of things. You just talked about what sort of is the core of basis, but why do you have such a variety or a varied selection of training modalities that you offer, that you teach?
I mean, the big one, like, is just kind of going back to the things that really drew us into training, was like classic bodybuilding, hypertrophy, feats of strength, stuff like that. Like, my wife and I both really enjoyed those things. And so that's definitely our preferred pursuit. I used to compete in strongman and CrossFit, as she did in CrossFit as well. And we did that stuff prior to doing FRC, but we couldn't find ways to really make it sustainable. So, incorporating like the kin stretch stuff, which is really just a nice way of putting all the functional ranging principles into a class-based setting. So we used to offer these kin stretch classes, which was another class on our roster, but it was an easy way to get people in and just say, just take this class, follow along with us. We're going to take you through this joint specific, tissue specific training stuff. And then the other aspect was just the finding a more specific approach for doing conditioning training, because prior to, learning about like training in different heart rate zones and developing aerobic capacity, we just did high intensity training. So between the strength work and the high intensity conditioning, we were just, piling on high intensity training on top of high intense training. And having this balance lets us, pursue those things that we really like, that are our biggest interest, but do it in a way that really is sustainable and help people get them to understand what their body needs to be able to do those things if they want to pursue these feats of strength, bodybuilding, stuff like that. Things that are, long term, I would argue, if that's all you're doing, are not really good for you. Like, so much of training that we want to pursue ends up causing problems. Like, for my own experience was training through my teens and 20s, doing CrossFit and bodybuilding and Olympic weightlifting and getting really strong and feeling good, and then just continuing to do the same stuff. And then, like, I turned 30 and everything started to fall apart. And as I got later into my 30s, it just got worse and worse. It's like, why was all the training that got me in really good shape, that made me feel great, now making me feel terrible? What's happening? So that's why we have all of that stuff.
Well, it's interesting that there's a few things that you mentioned there. First of all, the idea of sustainable training, and there a lot of people forget that, and there, I have to admit that as a meathead myself, somebody who was a gym rat in younger age, I love being in the gym. I love being in the dungeon. I love lifting heavy things and throwing things around. I don't have as much time to do it now as I did before, but I still love that. So when I think about CrossFit as an idea, I love the idea of it, because if you look at the amount of work under the curve that a CrossFit athlete produces, I think it's amazing, and they work at a high intensity level, and they produce a large amount of their work capacity is high, and they produce a large amount of work. However, it is very difficult for that to be sustainable. And I said to you before we started that if you come to our gym, it looks like a CrossFit gym, and a lot of the people who come to end up being members at our gym are ex-CrossFit people, or ex-CrossFit athletes who were injured. They were sent to us because they were injured. They were broken somehow. We rehabbed them. We fixed them, whether it was surgically or non-surgically. And then they ended up staying because what we do is more sustainable, and they can still do a lot of the CrossFit type of activities and movements, but they can do it in a sustainable way. And I told you before that I wear a couple of hats, and in this setting, I wear a couple of hats because there is still that gym rat part of me. And even when I'm at home, I'll do stuff at home, and my wife will go, "Jesus, what are you doing, man? Like, you're a grown man and you know better." Because there's that young kid in me who's just like bigger, faster, stronger. I want to lift more, but I'm always having to remind myself, okay, but yeah, this is not sustainable. You can't do this all the time. And it's not because of lack of desire. It's just because with inadequate rest, inadequate time for cellular repair, or whatever, or just too high a volume, that eventually you're going to break down, right? Like it's just the tissues will break down, even though your heart and your mind may not break down, the tissues will break down. So we need to approach things from the viewpoint of sustainable, and part of that issue as well is it's a psychological issue, in that I got to take my ego out of it. Like at this point in my life, I have to remember, okay, I'm now 53 years old, and I'm not trying to be like, at one point I was trying to be a professional football player, right? So I was trying to make it to the CFL, which is our equivalent of the NFL. And I was fortunate enough to get there. Things didn't work out, so I had to go back to school, and hence the reason why I became an orthopedic surgeon. But I have to remember, like, I'm not trying to do that anymore, and I'm not trying to be like a world-class CrossFit athlete or any of these things, man. I'm just trying to be somebody who is stronger than the average. I want to not be the average 53-year-old. So I want to be more than that. I want to be stronger, more mobile, more able to do shit than somebody else who's my age. But I have to recognize I'm not trying to be world-class at anything. I'm training more for longevity. And although everybody thinks that they're going to be a superstar at whatever it is they're doing, I think people need to put their egos in check sometimes. Say, look, man, like, we're here to be healthy for a lifetime and be able to do stuff. It's more important that I be able to run and play with my grandkids when I'm 75 than for me to try to be the strongest at whatever it is I'm doing today. Like that's the reality of it. So it's both an ego issue.
Yeah, it's funny, man. It's amazing. That's what it is. The ego. I laugh. I mean, I'm gonna be 40 in like 3 weeks, and it's amazing how much I still have to battle my ego. Even knowing, working with all the people that I've worked with at this point, that's still the biggest hurdle for me, is like telling my ego to shut the fuck up and just you don't need to push yourself like this. But that's all I know. Like if all I had to do was intensity and push myself hard, training would be so easy.
Yes.
I would feel terrible, but that's my go-to. And I think that's for a lot of people. Like I totally get that, man.
Yeah. It's funny. It's one of the things that I think about now, which I never thought about before. As I said, I'm 53. And so I think I know people that, are my age that have either had serious medical issues or have died, and not necessarily from training or anything, but people my age who have died of natural causes, right? Whether that be cardiac problems or whatever. And so there's a few times, like I never, if you talked about heart rate monitor training, and I have a heart rate monitor, and I used to use it when I was teaching. Because one of the things I used to teach was aerobics and box fit and all that kind of stuff. I did some of that, and then I did other stuff before what I have now. And I used to wear the heart rate monitor, and then I stopped wearing, because I was like, oh man, I don't want to see that number. Because I know I shouldn't be that high all the time. But
right.
But I didn't I haven't worn it recently, but I was training a little while ago, and I was doing some high intensity intervals, and I would just, during each rest phase, I would just kind of check my heart rate. I'd just check my radial pulse, and I'm monitoring what the heart rate is, and then sort of how quickly I would return to normal. And a thought came in my head, which I had never thought before, and it was like, holy shit, bro! Like, maybe you should just like take it down a notch, because people that have died. and it's like I'm healthy. I've not had any medical issues in the past. I've not, had a history of taking medications or anything like that. But who's to say like that I don't have some kind of atherosclerosis that I don't know about or whatever, right? And it's like that for the first time, that thought came into my head, and I was like, wow. Like before I was always like, how much harder can I go? Can I like just, and I would kind of go until I couldn't, right? Until I had to lay down. I was too out of breath. And then I started thinking, oh, like shit, like I shouldn't be doing that. And and of course I'm doing this in the backyard or whatever, and my wife is looking out and she's like shaking her head because she's always telling me, you need to just tone it down. This is not what is for sustainable. So yes, the ego is always something that you have to keep in, that we have to keep in check. But even now, I've started to think, oh my God, there's potentially health ramifications from this, right? So even though I know better, I'm still doing it.
Totally. Well, you probably see a lot of that in your field anyway, just the classic, like, I know what's good, but it's hard to follow my own advice. Like, I'm a terrible self-trainer. I'm really nice to people. I'm an asshole to myself, That's hard to reconcile that. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. So now you've owned a number of different facilities. So you said so 2 CrossFit gyms in Denver, 1 in California, and so now you have Basis Health and Performance. Is Basis Health and Performance something different than what you've had before? And if so, why is it different than what you've had in the past?
Yeah, so it's similar to the business in California, except it's out on the internet now. Before we had the gym facility, we had very limited time, or we were only willing to make very limited time to incorporate the online training component. And for a long time, especially we had my oldest daughter's 8. After the first kid, we were just kind of looking for ways to try to create a little more time where we could just be home with the kids, just because between coaching and running the business and doing all that stuff, there was just, it's just like, there's no time left over. And so we'd had these fantasies of doing the business from our house and trying to find a way to make that work. And we really struggled with like the credibility component. It's like when you have a facility that looks nice, people walk in and you're like, trust me, look at all this that I have, and thinking about trying to do that, we're like, hey, come to my basement and train. I swear I'm not going to murder you down there. I'm not a weirdo. Or even just like, how do we even get out there on the internet? How do people find you? We struggled with that. And between COVID and all of the fires and stuff that were happening in California, we just ended up having a lot more time to kind of pursue the online side. And we realized that it had some potential. So that was pretty much what got us out of California and into New York, was just realizing, like, if we're going to do this, this is the time. It was right before my oldest daughter was going to start first grade, and we wanted her to just start first grade and like be able to stay in school and not pull her out. And so we just kind of got it together, and we built this studio in our house and went fully into the online side of it. So very similar business idea, except now it's not 100%, because we do have people who are local who come train at our house, but 90% of our business is all out in this form here.
And how did you find that transition from sort of a physical space to more of an online?
There's components of it that are wonderful, and there's things that are tough. A big one was just we live in a fishbowl now. I mean, there's times where I'm like, holy shit, I haven't driven my car for like 5 days. Like, I need to go out and make an errand to the store just for my sanity to like get out of the house, because we just do everything from the house. So that took a little bit of time, because prior to that, prior to 2 years ago, I would drive to the gym. I had, way back in the day, I had a corporate job. I mean, you've worked, the normal grind where you get up, you go to work, you do that stuff. So having all that just sort of disappear all in over a couple week period was harder to adjust. I really like being able to be home. I mean, it's it's really lovely, like to have so much flexibility to build our day out however we want to do it. I have time to train, I have time to hang out with the kids. I really like that aspect of it, but I do find that I have to make myself get out and do silly things that I never would have thought about before. Like going to the store feels like an adventure now, which that's just still weird in my brain, but that's pretty much the main difference.
And with the online stuff, is it all sort of one-on-one personal training, or are you doing any group settings kind of things?
Yeah, no group stuff. Although we've had like kin stretch classes that we've done that are sort of remote, but mostly what I do, I mean, we have like the business, we have online programs that we sell. We have like a monthly subscription program. A lot of what I do in a one-on-one setting, remote stuff is joint specific assessments and then training to go with that. So people are like, my shoulder hurts when I do whatever exercises. Can you help me try to fix that? And so we do a remote assessment and I go through that with them. And then we go through the appropriate training on what I think they should be doing to improve that lacking capacity of their shoulder. And so I do a lot of that stuff. And then I also just have some regular clients that I just do traditional training. We run through actual training sessions together, although everything sort of is following this functional range conditioning. And lately what we use is called the internal strength model. So it's sort of internal tissue and joint specific training. But again, geared towards things like maximal strength, hypertrophy, stuff like that, or athletic endeavors. But that's probably like 70% of what I do is the joint specific assessment stuff and then training to help people resolve those things.
Okay. Now, the internal strength model, never heard of that before. I'm familiar with, as I said, the FRC from Spina.
Yeah.
Who is that from, or is this something of your own creation, or what's the deal with that?
No, I would love to say that it is, but I don't think I have the capability to make that one up. No, this is sort of functional range conditioning's latest certification and their latest endeavor as far as training goes. And it's
okay.
A lot of like stuff you're probably familiar with functional range conditioning. It's sort of their approach on how to pursue strength training, whether that's hypertrophy, maximal strength, athletic pursuits. It's very specific as far as, this is how we train for joint range of motion. This is how we train to improve connective tissue load bearing capacity. We want to train slow twitch fibers, fast twitch fibers. It's just very specific as far as how you're training tissue. Okay. And so it's this overarching model that you can follow based on, whatever you want to pursue, which is, I think that's my favorite aspect about this kind of training, is that it's very open-minded as far as what people want to do. I mean, you're out on the internet doing stuff, like there's so much black and white, good and bad as far as training goes. I like this just because of the fact that it's like, this is, you can prepare your body to do whatever you want, but you got to make sure that it's prepared. Otherwise, shit's not going to go well. But I like that unbiased approach. That's cool to me.
Most definitely. Now, in your bio, one of the things it talks about, mentions is your past as a cheerleader. So in the past, were you a competitive gymnast, or were you just like a recreational tumbler type guy that sort of found his way onto a cheerleading team?
I don't even know if you could say that I was a recreational tumbling guy. I was pretty difficult as a child, and I didn't want to do anything that my parents suggested that I do, which is funny, sounds just like my children now. And so I never wanted to get into that stuff. And I never played sports. I pretty much just wanted to skateboard and play video games. And I missed a lot of that athletic opportunity as a kid, just because I was just, not into doing things that other people did. I wanted to do something different, or things that I perceived as cool. And when I went to college, I had a friend who was a cheerleader who lived in the dorm with me, and he was like, dude, you like lifting weights, you should come be a cheerleader. And I was like, cheerleading? Like, one, I have no interest in sports. Two, I know all the stereotypes about cheerleaders. I just thought, I was like, I have no interest in doing this. But he's like, no, it's really cool. Like this, I think you'll like the stunting part where you throw people in the air and catch them. And he talked me into going to practice with him, and I went to one practice, and I was hooked on that aspect. But I was like the worst cheerleader ever, as far as like paying attention to the games and participating in the actual sport aspect. All I wanted to do was throw people in the air and learn all these stunts. But it was really cool because that got me into Olympic weightlifting and just that kind of explosive style of strength training, which I had never done before. And that was, I mean, that was a big perspective shift in strength training for me, because up to that point I was just doing bodybuilding stuff and, you know, classic stuff. I don't even think I trained my legs at that point. That actually, fortunately for cheerleading, that actually got me into training my legs, because I had no legs, and you need legs to throw people in the air, it turns out.
Well, you know, it's interesting because with your interest in mobility training, there is a lot of sort of crossover between some of the things that they do for gymnastics for flexibility and mobility and gymnastic strength. So that, you know, I kind of wondered where that nexus was. And you know, you're currently certified in FRCMS and Kinstretch. So I guess my question here is, how exactly did you get involved with mobility training? And I think you mentioned a little bit of the story before, but let's expand upon that more. And yeah, so tell us how that came about.
Sure. Yeah, well, I did leave one detail out about the cheerleading thing. That was my first intro into gymnastics, because to be able to try out for the team, they wanted you to be able to do a standing back tuck, which I had no chances of doing that. I mean, it was terrifying. And so I went to an adult gymnastics class like one day a week, and I learned how to do a back handspring and a standing tuck so I could go try out for the team. And I learned how to do it, and then I got on the team, and that got me into doing more. But I was always interested in doing gymnastics. You know, I did the base level of like standing tuck, back handspring. That was pretty much all I ever did. Pretty much until I got into CrossFit, and that was when I was a claims adjuster. I worked for an insurance company for a long time, back like in the around 2007 through 9. And I started doing CrossFit then, and that exposed me to more gymnastic stuff. I mean, basic stuff, ring skills, things like that. And through that, I found gymnastics bodies. And after we sold our shares of our business at our CrossFit gym in Denver, when we moved to California, we started coaching at a gym called NorCal Strength and Conditioning. They were like CrossFit gym. They were one of the first, maybe like the third affiliate, but they had de-affiliated. I just tried to get away from CrossFit to find something that was more sustainable. And we had hosted a gymnastics bodies seminar, and I got really into the gymnastics side of stuff, at least as much as you know, somebody who'd never done gymnastics before could get into it to try to train it. And those were some of the first times that I had heard about, you know, things like making sure that your connective tissue can tolerate these loads that you want to do. Because, you know, I think prior to learning about gymnastics body stuff, I had never really thought about the progression and preparation just to have somebody start learning some of those basic gymnastic skills. I mean, what they consider basic, to me, those are like amazing that anybody can do that stuff. But as far as gymnastics world goes, it's, you know, it's the basic stuff. Like muscle up isn't really a thing. That's just what you do to get on the rings to start your ring routine. But for most of us, muscle ups are pretty damn impressive and challenging to learn. And so that exposed me to all of the gymnastics stuff, which I loved. And I realized how many holes I had as far as my capabilities went. Like, you know, like why do my elbows hurt trying to hold this chin over bar hold? Like lots of things that I didn't understand. And that was pretty much the pursuit through the gymnastics thing. And, you know, at that point, like I was pretty burnt out on CrossFit because it was just crushing me, and all I still wanted to do was train really hard with lots of high intensity. And I just kind of got progressively worse. Like I just kept having more and more little injuries. I mean, at the worst, you know, I didn't even have to do any heavy lifting to like throw my back out. I literally would like bend over to tie my shoes, and I would have a violent back spasm that would last for weeks, and my wife would have to help me put my pants on and sit on the toilet. I mean, I was just really strong in the gym and fragile in every other aspect of life. And that's when I first found functional range conditioning. A friend of mine actually showed up on Instagram, and we were one of the instructors. I was like, man, that's crazy. Like, look what that guy's doing with his shoulder. What is this FRC stuff? And I started to look more into it, and it sounded very appealing, mostly because of what I was going through. I mean, with my own body, but also just with training people. It's like, why why is this person that I train, they can do pull-ups, they can do these exercises, their shoulders feel great. This person who has what looks like a similar shoulder does the same thing and they start to fall apart. I always like, these were questions that I didn't really understand, even though I was still trying to train people and figure that stuff out. And as soon as we went to that first FRC certification, I was like, oh, this is a whole different perspective. It was just approaching training in a way that I had never ever thought about. And that was, then down the rabbit hole I went and continued to change our training. I mean, to the where we wanted to open up a business kind of with these concepts in mind. So that's I don't know, that's like the 10,000-foot view or something.
Yeah, yeah. So, and why is it? So some of the other stuff that you mentioned. So you mentioned Christopher Summers' gymnastic bodies, and then there's some other older school techniques such as elastic steel. So what is it about? What is it about FR? What is it about Andrea Spina's approach that has grabbed you more so than some of these other more classic techniques?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of things that are different, but I think the biggest one is the assessment component. It's like you get this body in here who wants to do squats and pull-ups and stuff like that. And prior to doing FRC stuff, the approach is like, well, you can't do pull-ups, so we'll try to do pull-ups with some assistance and we'll just sort of progress you to doing harder and harder versions of pull-ups. Where, this approach was like, look at this person's just their shoulder joint. How does their shoulder joint move? Like, do they have internal and external rotation? Is there space for that joint to move around? Maybe they don't have any external rotation. If that's the case, we should focus on training that quality of their shoulder to improve their external rotation, just so they can get their joint to actively move in these positions that they're going to be using. And that, I mean, it seems so straightforward and it makes so much sense. That was something that I probably could have been out in the woods for like 3 lifetimes training people and not figured that out though. But now it's like, duh, that makes sense. And so that aspect of just looking at somebody's body and being able to tell right away what exercises are appropriate for you to do now and what parts of your body do we just need to improve the general capacity on. Like, we want to do pulling exercises. Okay, we can probably pull within these ranges of motion, but we know that if you want to do a full dead hang pull up, you need more external rotation in your shoulder. So we can just train that stuff directly. And, that was really the thing initially that started fixing all of our clients that we were training. It's like, I know why you hurts when you do pull-ups, like your external rotations like that. We need to fix that. And even if you're doing pull-ups with a band, you're still putting your shoulder into a range of motion where that joint just doesn't go. And that was the big one. And like the internal strength model stuff it's that same concept. It's just even more specific about training in general. It's like you need space between your bones for the bones to move around and go to those places that they're going to go into for a certain exercise. You need to have control over those ranges. You need connective tissue that's going to tolerate that much load. And so now we just have ways where we can train that stuff really directly, like, which makes training look a lot different, but it's really, it's the only thing that I've experienced that really kind of does all of those things that I think we want from training. I think that's a big thing, a big misconception. I mean, you probably deal with that a lot, like with people that you get in your gym. I know for years, like, in my mind, if I can deadlift 500 pounds, I must have a healthy spine. If I can squat X amount, my knees are probably really good. And so all of my training was just around squatting and deadlifting and pressing and all that stuff. Little did I know that, like, my brain is just prioritizing tissue based on how I'm using it. And like, all of my stimulus for my training is like muscles, train the muscles. I don't care if my shoulder externally rotates. I never put it there with enough frequency or load that my brain thinks it's a priority for my shoulder to go there. So I've just kind of lost that ability. Same thing with my hip, my knee. It's like, to me, what I love about it is that it really does. I think it's an easy way to get what we all think we're doing when we're just training and lifting weights. Because I think there's just a lot of misconception about that. It's like, well, if I want to be healthy, I just need to do like some high intensity conditioning and lift some weights and I'm probably good. And there's more that our body needs than just that. And a lot of the time we don't experience that until we get to a certain age, especially if you've been training for a long time, because it's a very similar story. It's like, people start to get a little bit older and then all this stuff starts to cause problems. They're like, I don't get it. I'm going to the gym. I'm working out. Like, that stuff works great. Why does it make me feel like shit now? that was the thing that was like, this is awesome. This is great.
Mm-hmm. It's funny that when you talk to people that come to our facility for the first time, a lot of the people, it takes a while for them to have buy-in, because people are coming there, they think it looks like CrossFit gym, so that's what they're expecting. And they don't understand when we say, oh shit, Grayson, like this, we have this movement on the workout for today, but you are not able to do that movement because we can see that you are this or that, and you're not flexible enough, or you don't have the strength here to support that. And they're like, what are you talking about, bro? I can deadlift this much. I can do this. I can. And we're like, sure, you can do those things. But have you seen that the kinds of, compensations that you're doing to get that? And so we are always taking people back a step and taking them back a step. And that, again, to bring up the whole ego thing, people get frustrated because they're like, I can do this. You guys don't know what you're talking about. Why are you doing this? Right. And it takes some time for people. We do have some people who come and then they leave after a short while because they're like, you guys work out too slow, or you guys are not pushing hard enough, or this and that and the other. And it's like, well, no, you're not ready for that movement. You think you're ready, but you're not ready. And yes, you could be strong. I've seen this. I've seen it happen. For example, we're doing ring work, and we're trying to really work false grip, and we're trying to tell people, oh, your connective tissue at your elbows needs to be it needs to be acclimatized to this movement before we start adding on other things, and have people who are, you look at them and they look jacked, and you go, there's no reason why, from a muscle point of view, they wouldn't be able to do this. But when you look at what they've done in the past and look at that they've never trained that tissue, then you go, yeah, this is going to be a problem for you, right? Like there's a reason why it takes guys like years of training to be able to do the iron cross. And there's lots of people who technically are strong enough, they lift heavy enough weights that they should be able to do it. But the iron cross isn't a well, it is a strength issue. Yes, you got to be really strong to be able to do that. But that's not the big thing that is the issue with the iron cross. It's a connective tissue issue. And if you haven't trained your connective tissue, you are going to be in a world of hurt, right? So people get upset about that because they're like saying to them, oh, well, geez, you can't do this thing that you think you can do, right? And it's not just about strength.
Totally.
There's other aspects, as you mentioned, right?
Yeah. I mean, that was a big perspective shift, was just realizing like, oh, the muscles aren't the most important thing. Like, if you really think about it, like having good connective tissue and healthy joints is probably the thing that holds people back the most. Like, training your muscles, that's easy. Lift weights, make it challenging. You'll get bigger muscles, but are you building that muscle on top of robust connective tissue or shitty connective tissue? Are you building on top of an elbow that doesn't do fundamental elbow things? And it's tricky because your body's so good at just accomplishing tasks. It's like, I'll keep doing this. I'm not really good at it. I'll just keep doing it until the wheels fall off. And like, if the wheels haven't fallen off yet, it is just like that. You're like, but why? I deadlift time. Yeah, my back hurts sometimes, but it's fine. You're like, maybe not.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, I recently did a video about Devin Larratt, who is a world-class, arm wrestler. So he's a guy
Monster.
He lives fairly close to me. And I had known about him in the past because he used to be a Canadian Special Forces JTF2 assaulter. And so I knew about him in the past. But I recently interviewed him about arm wrestling and just his preparation. And one of the things that's funny, like there's lots of things wrong about what Devin does, but the one thing that I really like about what he's doing now is he said, like, I don't really train anymore for bigger, faster, stronger. I don't do that. I train for longevity and I train for my connective tissue because this sport is very, very hard on connective tissue. And so he is, whenever he is training, like one of his principles, he does a low number of reps, but he's doing it often throughout the day. And so he's always doing stuff, always. And he says, I am milking fluid and blood and plasma throughout the connective tissues multiple times a day. I'm just doing that because you could do a workout and they're exposed to that once, or you can do sub-maximal stuff all day long, and they are just slowly getting more and more repetition. They're getting more and more nutrients. They're getting an opportunity to rest because you're never ever taking them to a super, super high level. And I thought that was very interesting. And I thought it was a very mature approach, because if you look at some of the guys that he is arm wrestling against, some of these dudes like Levon is like a 400-pound monster, and Dennis Ciprienko or whatever his name is, like some of these dudes are absolutely monstrous. And it's not to say that Devin's not a huge dude, because just when I interviewed him about 2 months ago, he was preparing for his match against Gennady, and at that point he was like at 275, and I think just before he arm wrestled him, he was 295. So he's a big dude, but certainly he was, he is of the mindset now that the strength is not what is going to he's certainly strong enough, and the strength is not what's going to help him be successful. It's it's the strength of his connective tissue, the resilience and the robustness of his connective tissue, which is going to allow him to sustain a position for a long period in a match, and it's also going to help him to recover between matches. So sure. I think it's very interesting, and a lot of people have not really given it the credence or the importance that they need to in the past, but people are starting to wake up to that now, I think.
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely spreading out there. I mean, I laugh at some of what my trend is now, because so long I really felt like there's no way that you could make progress doing what I'm doing now. Like my actual strength training is really, really minimal. I mean, I have like 3 dedicated days a week of strength training stuff that takes about an hour. And in that whole session, 90% of it is joint and connective tissue specific. Like when I do muscular work, I do one set, I'll do it to failure, and I'll do that once every 2 weeks. So it's like I don't squat. I squat every 14 days at that intensity. The next week I might do light squats that are like speed related, where I'm trying to just go faster with light weight. But it's, the amount of stuff you need to do to really make progress is so much less than I think what we've all been conditioned to think. It's always like, in my mind, like more is better. If 10 sets of squats is good, well, 12 sets of squats definitely has to be better. It's like, it's so easy to just pile it on, especially if you're already susceptible to your ego dictating how you train.
Yes. So when you look back now, so you've been an athlete as a cheerleader, you've been a gym owner, you've been a trainer, and what would you say has influenced your current training philosophy the most? Which of those things, or is it the combination of them all? Have they all contributed equally? What has contributed most to who you are today and what you offer to clients?
Yeah, I mean, I mean the biggest component that's not related to education or practice or anything like that is just this component of doing things that are physical for our anatomy. Like how much our anatomy relies on us moving and doing stuff. That's a huge motivator for me. And so I want people to understand that as much as possible. Like movement is the medicine, or whatever you want to call it. You need to find the right amount, what's appropriate for you. All of those little details are important, but like we've evolved to move, and that should be something that's a part of everybody's life in a way bigger way than it is, because that's often like the first thing to go away. It's like busy, I got kids, I have work, stress, all these things. I don't need to move. I just want to sit and relax. And it's like, that's the enemy, right? We need to keep our bodies moving. So that's a huge component of like my motivation for doing this training. But as far as shaping how I approach training and what I do for clients now, the FRC stuff has had more impact than everything else. I mean, for a really long time, I thought CrossFit was like, everybody needs to do CrossFit. My mom came to our CrossFit gym and trained. This little lady who's never worked out in her whole life outside of walking. I'm trying to convince this 60-plus-year-old that she needs to do CrossFit. Looking back, it's like, that was not appropriate. I just didn't know better. I thought this is going to be good. Of course, I was careful with her, but she didn't need to do CrossFit. She needed to work on her elbow and her wrist. She's an artist who sits and draws all the time. Like, she needed very different training. And so the FRC stuff has really radically changed my approach. Like when I talk with somebody, like, you want to do these things? Okay, I don't, they're like, what should I do to work out? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Like, we got to sit down and talk about this. Like, let's talk about your injury history. What do you do? What's your life like? How does your shoulder move? What does your body feel like? Like, all of these things are so important. I try to tell people, like, if I had 10 people with a shoulder problem, I wouldn't know what to tell them to do unless I actually got some time with that person to see what their shoulder looks like and moves like and feels like. And all of those details are so important. We're very much unique little snowflakes in that regard. So helping people like figure that out and learn about their body to know what's actually going to be good for them as an individual. And of course they can pursue individual goals, but that is going to be a little bit different for every single person. So that's like, the FRC stuff has really made me embrace that approach, where before I was like, yeah, everybody just needs to back squat heavy. You'll be fine. Back squat heavy. And it's like, well, maybe you don't need to back squat heavy. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. So
yeah.
if you look at your current approach, okay, so what are three ideas that are essential to your current coaching or training approach, okay, that current day Grayson is going to go back in time with the time machine to 10 years ago, Coach Grayson, and you're going to say, yo, bro, listen, man, come on, this is what you need. These are the three things. This is what's important. Everything you're doing now, forget it. So what are those three things?
Oh, that's a good one. Okay. Number one, I would go back and tell my 10-year younger self that I need about 10% of the intensity that I'm applying towards my training. I could get rid of 90% of the intensity that I was using and the frequency of like intensity. Just, I don't need to squat 3 days a week. The other one would be understanding and embracing the concept of maintenance, because I think I did this. I think everybody does this when we train. Like, we always are constantly, we're pursuing. I want to get this skill. I want to get more pounds on my squat. All these things. We kind of ignore the component of, we also need to maintain our body's current capacity, and there's ways that we can do that. Like FRC, we do cars every day. You just take your each joint through its full range of motion a couple times. Seems like it's minor, doesn't do anything, but that has a massive impact on how your brain perceives the importance of maintaining those ranges of motion. I would tell myself that is something that's a huge component. Like, I should be just as concerned with the maintenance stuff as I am with gaining more stuff. And let's see, number three would be do aerobic conditioning, again, at a low intensity. You don't need more high intensity conditioning. You need to get regular low intensity cardiovascular training. Those three things would be the top three for me, for sure.
Okay.
And so, I would tell my future self that I was totally wrong too. I know what I would think if I heard that 10 years ago. I'd be like, bullshit. That's bullshit.
Go harder, baby. Come on.
Yeah. Go deadlift more. Stop complaining.
Yeah. Now, interestingly, so and I like those three, but here's a question. Because I do think it's important for us to lift heavy things. I do think that that's important, and to do, resistance training, where you are at or near maximal output at some time. And I'm not saying you need to do that all the time, but I do think that's important. So how do you reconcile the those three things that you just said, but that idea that we need to lift heavy things, and what I'm driving at, it's like, I think about, these dudes that go to the gym and they'll go and they'll just pick up like the 5-pound dumbbells and they're just doing dumbbell curls, and they do the same thing 3 days a week, every week for 52 weeks a year. And I don't think that serves a real purpose at all. So yeah, how do you reconcile what you just said with the idea that we got to lift heavy shit?
Yeah, totally. No, that's great. I mean, I totally agree. Like, I am a firm believer in strength. I think there's different ways to approach it, though. I mean, I think there's the classic things that we think of as strength: picking some heavy shit up off the ground, pressing something heavy overhead. Those things are all really important, but they're not appropriate for everybody at a certain time along the timeline, right? I think it's very worthwhile for everybody to pursue that goal of being strong, though. Like, you should be able to pick something up in a weird way and have your body be totally cool with that. You should be able to put your arms over your head with weight and have that be totally cool. But I think there's other ways that we can apply the intensity component. Like, I think that's the sweet spot, is like, we need intensity drives adaptation. Without intensity, you are that dude who just, I've been curling this 10-pound dumbbell for 50 reps a week, and I still pretty much can do that because you've never tried to push the intensity level. But I think two ways are, like, you need to find ways that you can apply small doses of that in ranges of motion that your body tolerates, and then find those other components of your body that don't deal with that intensity well, and pursue training those at intensity, but in a very specific way. Like, you have somebody who's got a shoulder issue. 90% of the time I see somebody who they have limited rotation. Let's just say they're lacking internal rotation and their shoulder doesn't do well with loading those ranges. Pursuing that and training it to get better, and being able to push the intensity on that, because we can apply a lot of intensity to a very small amount of tissue and still get good results. And it has the same aspect of changing tissue and developing that stuff, but it just doesn't look like what we normally do. So I think there's ways that you can embrace the intensity component, where you can do it on the stuff that works well, and on those parts that don't, find ways to apply that intensity there. And that's another reason why that joint and tissue specific training works great, because we can use that stuff there.
Mm-hmm. And I guess this, like, if you were to say, or if you were to look back now, say, even over the last, let's go 3 years, are you training the same way or coaching the same way that you were 3 years ago, or have things evolved in that time frame, and if so, how?
Yeah, they have. And really in the last, it's been about a little over a year and a half since we've been following this internal strength model. Prior to that, from like 2016 up to about a year and a half ago, we were doing kind of a combination of both. We used functional range conditioning principles, and we used traditional strength training, and we kind of just put those together as like a superset. Maybe you do some bench press, you do shoulder cars in between, something like that. Maybe before we do that, we train a little bit of shoulder internal rotation. Following the internal strength model, there's sort of a very specific workflow that we would go through, where you are putting training energy into each one of those components of your body. So we start with the deepest tissue. We're doing some kind of joint capsule work, whatever that is. Maybe we need more joint capsule space, so we start training that. Maybe we just need to stimulate the capsule, so we start with that stuff. We're sort of checking in between each component that we're doing, where we're using the full range of motion of the joint. If I do some specific stuff on the shoulder cap, I'm going to do shoulder cars afterwards and take that joint through that full range of motion now, just to make sure that my brain understands how to use that maybe new capsule space that I developed in that, or temporarily developed in that time that I was training it. And then maybe we do a little bit of connective tissue specific work on that area that we're going to be training. And then we get to the muscular component. When it's time for the muscular component, I'm trying to do like the most minimal effective dose to create an adaptation based on what we want. Do we want maximal strength? Are we going for hypertrophy? We kind of approach that by doing things to target failure in a different time component. And so really it's more so like, you look at, there's only so much energy to adapt. We want to make sure that we're being strategic as far as giving our body enough stimulus on each one of those to show that certain things are priority, although we're putting the most energy into that one thing that we want the most of. So it's not like I just go hard on everything that I do in the session. If I have a shoulder that doesn't need more capsule space and it's ready to go, maybe I can't put the intensity into the muscular stuff and I take that to failure. So I do one set to failure. I'm done with that. I'm going to move on, and next that's the end of the training session there. So it's sort of like being strategic about where the energy is going and only doing the minimal effective dose on what you need. So we're not just doing so much muscular work that there's nothing left for your body to adapt with just because it's going into repairing damaged muscle tissue or something like that.
So this is something that we talked about briefly before. And so this is sort of why I really want to talk to you. So what are your thoughts about the resilience of the human body and its ability to adapt to different forces and movements that might be considered unconventional? And the second part of that question is, are there any unsafe movements or positions?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I operate under the premise of there's no good movement, there's no bad movement, there's just unprepared bodies for those movements. So as far as resilience goes, I mean, all of the mechanisms to improve our capacity and to heal they're there. Like your body does that regardless of what we do, right? Like if you have surgery and you go sit for 2 months in a chair, your body heals from the surgery. Now it might heal in a way that's not ideal though, right? Like it might heal in a way where you lose a lot of capacity there. So a big component of this functional range conditioning stuff is like the idea of guiding the healing process. Like while that tissue is healing, we have tissue damage. As that tissue heals, you got to kind of show that tissue what it's supposed to do while it's healing. And we do that by loading it in some way, whether that's, loading it initially with really low intensity stuff like stretch, and then through that whatever range of motion you need to use, or if it's using isometrics. I mean, there's all these tools that we can use to do that. My belief is, you can recover from many, many things if you show your body what it needs to do. Like you just have to help it understand where it needs to put energy to change how tissue moves. Since all of our cells are changing, we can affect that cellular change as far as how it's happening. We got to do the work though. You got to make the cells work. Can't be a passive thing.
Mm-hmm. Have you had to ever had to deal with injuries yourself?
Yeah, I've had a number of injuries, not anything super catastrophic. I've, a few broken wrists. I got a pretty severe lung bruise crashing my one wheel. My one good injury that I haven't had fixed, I did this about 4 years ago. I have a fully torn AC joint. I had a grade 5 tear in my AC, partial tear in my CC ligament. And, I was really into the functional range conditioning stuff. And in my mind, I was like, I'm going to see what I can do without having surgery. And so I did, went through my own rehab stuff, just kind of following those principles of like the day of the injury, I'm trying to find how much pain-free range of motion I have and just sort of using that, like wearing the sling when I have pain, but taking it through as much movement as possible. And it was really cool to see the progress, and, and I'm willing to experiment on my own body. In like 4 weeks of that, I pretty much had full range of motion back. It took about 3 months for me to get back to normal training. But in those 3 months of training, of getting my shoulder back, it's like I still have this obvious structural issue. Like my collarbone doesn't just sticks out there and doesn't move with my scapula, which is obviously the problem. But I don't have any issues with it or pain. This shoulder is still stronger than my left side. And so, it was cool to see that. Again, just going back to that, like we have a lot of control over how this stuff works. We just got to put the time and the work in to make sure that it gets better. Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't, go find somebody who can help guide that process.
Mm-hmm. What are your own personal fitness goals? Not for your clients, but for you.
Yeah. Well, I really want to be a strong old dude. That's my goal. And I a lot of my training now is trying to find the right balance of being able to pursue some of these lofty strength goals that I have and actually feel good, because I've spent so much of my previous time training pursuing strength goals and making my body feel like shit, where that was the only thing that matters. Like, I hit the number on that lift, my back is killing me, I'm not going to be able to lift for 2 weeks. That's okay. Like, what I want to be able to do is pursue these strength goals and actually have my body feel really good, because that was always something that was like a second thing. Like, a big one for me now is doing a body weight bent press, which is the one where you're pressing yourself down underneath a weight. I want to be able to do that with my body weight. That's one of my big goals, but that's the main thing, is like, how long can I keep this stuff sustainable? And and really in the last 2 years has been the best progress I've made training in years. I mean, I've been pretty consistent since I was like 15 training. So I've hit more plateaus than I can count. I've had more training related injuries than I can count. And it's been really fun to just like actually have my body feel the best it's felt a long time. Like, my body feels better at 39 than it did at 29 by a long shot. I'm stronger. I train way less. And so I think has a lot of potential for being able to pursue that and just keep doing the things that still feed my ego a little bit, but are like happening in a way where I can just keep doing it and not fall apart. Because I did that. I've been down that road.
Yeah. Yeah. Obviously, this is something that you do for yourself. This is something that you do for your clients. But you are also a father, right? And you are fortunate enough to have a spouse who is involved in the same business, the same culture as you. So does any of this stuff make its way into what you do with your kids?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, my kids are very not open for suggestion when it comes to doing stuff. But another wonderful aspect of being able to do this from the house is that, we have a gym in the basement. And so the kids are with us all the time when we're training. And despite my best efforts to suggest things, they do stuff. They just like to participate in these things. They even like to do the FRC stuff. I mean, my youngest daughter's 3, so she's not quite as far along as the 8-year-old, but yeah, they have a really good mindset. My oldest daughter, I should really talk about her the most, but she's got a really good mindset when it comes to training, and just even some of these things that are, core principles for me now, like making sure her shoulders feels good when she wants to do something. If it doesn't, she'll say, "Dad, my shoulder's like a little funky." She'll want to address that and deal with it. So it's great to be able to, sort of set an example without having to push them to do it. So my hope is they stay like that. We'll see.
Well, so one of the greatest things, I remember being young and my father telling me things or my mother telling me things, and I would say, "Oh man, I'm never going to do that." Like, geez, what's wrong with you old people? Why don't you shut up? But I found that when I became a parent, a lot of the things that were some of the best lessons, I found myself saying those things again and repeating those. So there is a hope that while they may on the surface say, "Oh, I don't want to do that," or not be interested or whatever, that insidiously that stuff is kind of working its way in there, right? And you and your partner are demonstrating by example. So
Yeah,
that's something that will become sort of, they may not recognize it, but it will become innately a part of their core, because they just lived it.
it sure seems like it. I mean, that's one thing I'm still constantly reminding myself of, is not to worry so much about like the admonishments, telling them all that stuff, because the things that I catch them doing the most are just the things that I do that I don't talk about. Like, that's that shift. It's hard for me as a parent, though, because there's to be like, "Don't do that, do this. I'll just tell you the way because I have this experience." That's not what they want to hear, though. It's like they follow your example for sure. You're totally right about that.
Yeah. Okay, 2 more questions, young man, then I'll send you on your way.
Sounds good.
If you could make one mark on the fitness industry, like you have yourself, you have your personal clients, you have your people online, but if you could make one mark on the fitness industry, because I think right now you're like 110,000 followers on Instagram, what would that one mark be? What do you want to be remembered for?
I'm way less than that. I think I'm only at like 25. Whatever. My mark would be one, like, learn about your body, like learn about what your body needs, because all of our bodies need different things. And I think learning about how your body moves and feels and actually really paying attention to those more subtle signs that aren't just like, damn, my shoulder's killing me all the time or whatever that is. That and the fact that your body is changing right now and that you can make improvements that will make you feel better at 40 than 30 or 50 than 40. Like you can improve the way that your body moves and feels as you get older. And just because you're getting older or whatever your state your body's in now doesn't mean that that's what you must resign yourself to for the rest of your life. Like it doesn't just go downhill if you do something about it. And I think those are the two things that I would want everybody to understand about their bodies. It's like, it's not lost. Like when you're dead, yes, your cells are not going to change anymore. But until that point, you can do a lot.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Cool. And I like that because, one of the things that I think is so important for people is just to know that we can empower them, and they need to know that they actually do have some control over of what is going on. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, totally.
Last question: where can people find you online if they want to see what you're doing and, either sign up for what you're doing or, just listen what it is that you have to say?
Cool. Yeah. Well, my Instagram handle is Strange Grayson. I refuse to change my profile picture, so it's my dog wearing sunglasses. If you look at it, it is me. And the name of our business is Basis Health and Performance New York. If you type that into the Google, it will pull up our website that has all of our programs, our pricing, all of that stuff. We're easy to find there. You can also get to me on my Linktree through Instagram. So those would be the two best places.
Perfect. Well, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to talk about mobility and talk about training with me today. Grayson, I greatly appreciate it. I think there's lots of good gems in there for people who are interested in this. And I look forward to chatting with you again.
Likewise, man. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
No worries.